And, of course, we still have anarchy and catastrophe on our southern border, and our politicians are reacting exactly the wrong way. I heard some Republican running for governor this morning. I won't mention him because I don't want to embarrass him. Going on about how we have to be humane to the people who are coming across the border. Okay, we can be humane to the people who are coming across the border, but we can also deport them. I thought it was important, folks, as I'm wont to do, to really dig into some history here, because you hear all the time that we're turning our back on our history. We were a nation of immigrants, and so forth and so on. Well, every country is a nation of immigrants. What does that have to do with anything? We're talking about legal versus illegal immigration. I found a piece about Dwight Eisenhower. Now, Dwight Eisenhower, was he a radical right-wing Tea Party conservative Republican? He's broadly praised by Republicans and Democrats as a very solid president who did very solid things. Well, he did something many of you may not know about. About 60 years ago today, and it was explained by John Dillon. He was the former managing editor of the Christian Science Monitor. And about 8 years ago, almost to the day, Mr. Dillon wrote a piece for the Christian Science Monitor. At that point, we were dealing with George W. Bush and his push for amnesty. Now, you really need to listen to some of the history here. And you'll know more than anybody on Capitol Hill. You'll know more than any other commentator. And you'll realize that you're right. And historically, you're right. Now, Dillon wrote, this is 8 years ago, George W. Bush isn't the first Republican president to face a full-blown immigration crisis on the U.S.-Mexican border. He said 53 years ago, it would be 61 years ago now, when newly elected Dwight Eisenhower moved into the White House, America's southern frontier was as porous as a spaghetti sieve. As many as 3 million illegal immigrants had walked and waded northward over a period of several years for jobs in California, Arizona, Texas, and points beyond. Eisenhower cut off this illegal traffic. He did it quickly and decisively, with only 1,075 United States Border Patrol agents, less than 1/10 of today's force. And I dare say it's smaller now. The operation is still highly praised among veterans of the Border Patrol. Although there's little to no record of this operation in Ike's official papers, one piece of historic evidence indicates how he felt in a note that he had sent to Senator William Fulbright of Arkansas. Eisenhower, who was gearing up for his run for the presidency, told Fulbright that he was very concerned about, quote, the rise in illegal border crossings by Mexican, and I'm not going to use the word, to current rate of more than 1 million cases a year has been accompanied by a curious relaxation in ethical standards extending all the way from the farmer exploiters of this contraband labor to the highest levels of the federal government. He's talking about the lawbreakers, the businessmen, and those who were tolerating it, senior officials in the federal government. Years later, the late Herbert Brownell Jr., Eisenhower's first attorney general, said in an interview, the president had a sense of urgency about illegal immigration when he took office. He said America was faced with a breakdown in law enforcement on a very large scale. And when I say large scale, I mean hundreds of thousands were coming in from Mexico every year without restraint. Although an on and off again guest worker program for Mexicans was operating at the time, farmers and ranchers in the Southwest had become dependent on additional low-cost, docile, illegal labor force of up to 3 million, mostly Mexican laborers, reports Mr. Dillon. I'm skipping around a little bit here because it's too long. And what they point out is that there was a relationship between a number of these big businessmen and big ranchers and big farmer entities and those responsible for securing the border where they would look the other way. Profits from illegal labor led to the kind of corruption that apparently worried Eisenhower. Joseph White, a retired 21-year vet of the Border Patrol, says that in the early 50s, some senior U.S. officials overseeing immigration enforcement had friends among the ranchers and others, and agents did not dare arrest their illegal workers. Walt Edwards, who joined the Border Patrol in 1951, tells a similar story. He says, when we caught illegal aliens on farms and ranches, the farmer or rancher would often call and complain to officials in El Paso. And depending on how politically connected they were, there would be political intervention. That's how we got into the mess we are in now. During the 1950s, this good old boy system changed under Eisenhower, if only for 10 years. In 1954, just 60 years ago, Eisenhower appointed retired General Joseph Swing, a former West Point classmate and veteran of the 101st Airborne, as his new IRS commissioner. Politicians like Lyndon Johnson and Pat McCarran, senator of Nevada, favored open borders and were dead set against strong border enforcement. Eisenhower's attorney general at the time, Brownell, said, but General Swing's close connections to the president shielded him and the Border Patrol from their meddling. And one of the general's first decisive acts was to transfer certain entrenched immigration officials out of the border area to other regions of the country where their political connections with Johnson and McCarran had no effect. Then on June 17, 1954, what was called Operation Wet, you know what, began. They called it Operation Wetback. You can see it's part of history. I'm not calling it that. They called it that. Because political resistance was lower in California and Arizona, the roundup of aliens began there. 750 agents swept northward through agricultural areas with a goal of 1,000 apprehensions a day. By the end of July, over 50,000 aliens were caught in the two states. Another nearly 500,000, fearing arrest, fled the country. This is what Romney called, correctly, and he borrowed it from others, self-deportation. Now you're not even allowed to say that. By mid-July, the crackdown extended northward into Utah, Nevada, Idaho, and eastward to Texas. By September, 80,000 had been taken into custody in Texas. An estimated 500,000 to 700,000 illegals left the Lone Star State voluntarily. Self-deportation. And unlike today, illegals caught in the roundup were not simply released at the border, where they could easily re-enter the U.S. To discourage their return, General Swing arranged for buses and trains to take many of them deep within Mexico before setting them free. Tens of thousands more were put aboard two hired ships, the Emancipation and the Mercurio. The ships ferried the aliens from Port Isabel, Texas to Veracruz, Mexico, more than 500 miles south. There are now said to be 12 to 20 million illegal aliens in the U.S. It's amazing to me how that number never changes. And of those who live here, an estimated 85% are here illegally. One day in 1954, Border Patrol agent Walt Edwards picked up a newspaper in Big Spring, Texas, and saw some startling news. The government was launching an all-out drive to oust illegal aliens from the United States. And so this is what Eisenhower did. And he was very serious about it. And he put a general in charge of the project. This piece, July 6, 2006, John Dillon, Christian Science Monitor. He wasn't called a xenophobe. He wasn't called a racist. He wasn't called inhumane. And you can see what's happened in 60 years' time. Now people come here illegally and they get lawyers. Now people come here illegally and they get in-state tuition. Now people come in here illegally, they go to public school. They get free medical care. Now people come illegally and the court orders that they get driver's licenses. Now people come here illegally and the United States Supreme Court in an outrageous 5-3 decision rules that the President of the United States is free to ignore the immigration laws of the country. They call it prosecutorial discretion. A lot's changed in 60 years, and most of it not good. Certainly in this respect. Certainly in this respect. We won't secure the border. We won't deport a sizable number of people who are here illegally. Quite the contrary. We are conferring benefits. We are conferring rights. And to the detriment of society generally, and to the detriment of the American citizenry. Eisenhower understood it, and he wasn't the only one. When we come back, there was another man who understood it. He's been praised by Barack Obama. He's been praised by the radical leftists who today runs the Labor Department and used to run an illegal immigrant rights group in Maryland, Thomas Perez. There was a man who was violently opposed to illegal immigration. His name, Cesar Chavez. Eisenhower wound up deporting about 1.3 million illegal aliens. And there wasn't 11 or 12 or 20 million illegal aliens to choose from. And he wasn't alone. Before him, Harry Truman had a big push to deport illegal aliens. He wanted to make room for returning World War II vets to find jobs. And today you actually hear libertarian and conservative economists going on and on about how the importation of illiterate, unskilled, low-skilled individuals into this country, some of whom have terrible diseases, most of whom are completely unvetted, unknown to us, somehow is going to be a shot in the arm to the economy. That is a lie. It is a myth. It is deception beyond belief. It's an excuse for tolerating what should not be tolerated. I'm not even advocating anything at this point. I'm talking about our history, which they do not want to talk about. They pretend our borders have always been open. Anybody's allowed in. That's not true. Now, in the 1970s, about 40 years ago, Cesar Chavez, a radical leftist of Mexican heritage, a Mexican American, made it crystal clear that he was virulently anti-illegal immigrant. He was trying to organize the farm workers. He was celebrated by Obama. He was celebrated by the Obama administration. He is celebrated by the left, by the union movement, by the radical movements, by Latino organizations. And Cesar Chavez in his day was the leading opponent to illegal immigration. And it's pointed out by IJ Review. It's also pointed out by me and Liberty and Tyranny. But they write in one of the most shocking hypocrisies of Obama's tenure, he actually proclaimed that Cesar Chavez's birthday be celebrated to honor a man who was vehemently against illegal immigrants. Cesar Chavez is lauded by the left for organizing farm workers in order to improve their work environment. And because so many of these workers were Hispanic, many take him up as an inspiring leader for Hispanic causes. But this is problematic for Obama in attempting to co-opt Chavez's iconic status, because while he's pressing for comprehensive immigration reform that would normalize many illegal aliens, Chavez had a very strong dislike for illegal aliens. In fact, he was so much against illegal immigration, he took direct action to stop them. Miriam Paul, who wrote a biography on Chavez, she says, Chavez launched the Illegals campaign in 1974. That's what it was called. It was in the context of strikebreakers and easy availability of people who were brought across the border by U.S. employers to replace striking workers. Chavez's cousin Manuel started what was known as the wet line, quote unquote. Not me, I'm reading from this. A series of tents along a 25-mile stretch of the U.S.-Mexican border along Arizona, where some 300 members of what was then the United Farm Workers Union patrolled to keep would-be border crossers out. So imagine that. This supposed saint had an opinion that liberals now consider to be racist. Cesar Chavez Day. proclaimed by Labor Secretary Thomas Perez. Labor Secretary Thomas Perez, under Obama, invoked the late labor leader Cesar Chavez in an official statement citing his, quote, vision and moral example, unquote, should be used to, among other things, fixing our broken immigration system. Now, left out of that statement was that Chavez was an outspoken opponent not only of illegal immigration, but immigration generally. Because he understood, as a union organizer, that they were driving down wages of American citizens. And he was even noted to look down at illegal aliens because he believed they didn't really care about the country. They just wanted to take advantage of an expanded economy and opportunities here. Eisenhower, iconic, moderate Republican president. Cesar Chavez, iconic, radical, Latino union leader. They did not believe illegal immigration was healthy for the nation. And yet today we're told that illegal immigrants, whomever they are, whatever they've done, whatever their age, whatever their background, are more noble and virtuous than we the people. And it is we the people who need to step down and start objecting and support our political lords and what they seek to do to us. I'll be back. The United Farm Workers under Cesar Chavez in the 1960s and 70s would report sightings of illegal aliens to the Immigration and Naturalization Service. In 1969, Cesar Chavez led a march accompanied by Ralph Abernathy, president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the man who was number 2 to Martin Luther King, and then Senator Walter Mondale, along the border with Mexico, protesting the farmers' use of illegal aliens. And so much has changed since then. Now this is all for the good. And there's something wrong with us. The Democrat Party has understood for decades the import of illegal aliens and the need to turn them into citizens and voters. Historian Sam Lubell points out that the Democrat Party found a new source of political clout that favors them. That is, illegal immigrants. And he notes that the voting age children of the first great migration into this country, legal and illegal, constituted, quote, the big city masses who furnished the votes which reelected Franklin Roosevelt again and again and again, and in the process ended the traditional Republican majority in this country. Something the damn fool Republican leaders in this country don't get and never will. I've given up on them. Completely. And the situation legally is even worse than it was under FDR, because now we grant chain migration to illegal aliens. That is, illegal aliens who have their children here. That did not exist when FDR was president. See, you're being told over and over again what the history of immigration is in this country, with platitudes, with a couple sentences here and there. I'm explaining to you the real history. The real history. Now, I started today, I didn't get to finish. I said, let me look at the 3 countries where most of these people are coming from lately. And by the way, it's more than 3 countries. And it's not just Central and South America. It's China. It's a number of other places. It's the Middle East. People are pouring over this border. We have no idea who they are. We have no idea where they're going. But we know several countries. We know, for instance, El Salvador and Honduras. I didn't have time to get to Guatemala. You can look it up yourself. Here's the general requirements in El Salvador to obtain a work permit. A legal work permit if you're a U.S. citizen. Here are the requirements. Number 1, El Salvador. Application completed by the company hiring the applicant stating wages, duration of the employee's services. Number 2, the original birth certificate and have it translated into Spanish. Number 3, police records translated into Spanish. Number 4, the record should reflect residence of the applicant for the past 2 years in the country where he or she lived. These are the requirements. These are just the general requirements for a company hiring a U.S. citizen on a temporary work permit. The record should reflect residence of the applicant for the past 2 years in the country where he or she lived. Medical report from a Salvadoran physician stating the applicant does not suffer from a contagious disease. 2 copies of the applicant's passport or evidence of the applicant's citizenship. 2 copies of the company's deed with whatever modifications the company experienced. A complete application for the Salvadoran Labor Department, and on and on. That's if you're coming through the front door. What about Honduras? According to the Honduras Embassy website, you will need to employ the services of an attorney in Honduras to assemble your document package and be pre-approved if you want a temporary work status and you're a U.S. citizen. You'll need to fill out an application form and submit it along with an affidavit that you will honor and obey all the laws of Honduras. You must provide a criminal record or police report from the areas where you have lived to prove you aren't wanted as a criminal. You also need health documents from an institution or hospital recognized by Honduras. And you can, let's see here, you need an official copy of your birth certificate and copies of all the pages of your passport. And your passport must have been valid for at least the past 6 months prior to your entry. If you want to bring a wife and family member, you also need their passports and birth certificates and a marriage certificate. Now, if you migrate to work, you must provide a copy of your employment contract. And if you're retired, you need to prove you earn a pension of $1,500 a month. If you're not working or retired, you need to prove you have an income of at least $2,500 a month. In other words, Honduras doesn't want welfare cases. Honduras has no intention of subsidizing foreigners coming into their country, even legally. El Salvador and Honduras. And if I were to go through the other countries, Guatemala, China, you'd get the same or worse. And in the past, I've gone through what Mexico's rules are. You get across our border, hey, will you show up in 3, 4, 5 years for your administrative hearing? Sure I will. 85 to 90% never show up. And then we're told they're living in the shadows. We have to entice them to come out of the shadows and treat them like human beings. Yes. In-state tuition, driver's licenses, whatever you do, don't ask them about their health, their criminal background. Certainly don't ask them where they're from, because that would be racism, rampant racism. In fact, whomever they are, wherever they're from, whatever their background, in-state tuition, driver's licenses. We've got sanctuary states. We've got sanctuary cities. And yet the Supreme Court rules that only the federal government can determine our immigration rules in this country. Amazing, isn't it? Then we have Jeb Bush, who obviously knows every single illegal alien coming into the country who says they come here for love. They come here for love. What an idiot. We have the Democrats working as hard as they possibly can to legalize and then confer citizenship on people they know nothing about. People coming into this country with diseases we've conquered as a free people. Now we're importing them knowingly. Everybody coming across that border is not a saint. Everybody coming across that border is not well behaved. We know this from our own history with illegal aliens. Our prisons are full of illegal alien criminals. So everybody's not coming here for love. Some of them are coming here for hate. And if we don't have a lawful, organized, manageable system, we don't know who's coming here and why they're coming here. You would have thought after 9/11 You would have thought after 9/11 that our immigration policies would have been strengthened rather than weakened. That people who overstay their visas are tracked down and thrown the hell out of the country. Student visas, work visas, whatever visas. That's exactly what the terrorists used on 9/11. You would think that we want to secure the border, knowing what's going on in the Middle East. You would think we want to secure the border, knowing that we've been hit by terrorists even since 9/11. Ask the people in Boston. Oh, I know they didn't come through the southern border. I'm talking about our entire immigration system. This is absolutely irresponsible, unconscionable, what these politicians and bureaucrats and ethnic front groups and foreign countries are doing to this country. And then we have to be lectured. We're told there's something wrong with us, that we're against free enterprise, that we're against individual liberty, that somehow we're un-American. I just told you what Dwight Eisenhower did. Was he un-American? The man who led our forces on D-Day and so many other days during World War II? I just told you what Cesar Chavez did and what he believed. Will the radical left now embrace him or pretend none of that history exists? A country cannot survive this way. It simply cannot survive this way. When its language is under attack, when its culture is under attack, when its school system, its law enforcement system, its hospitals are under attack. A country cannot survive this. I don't care what country it is. I don't care what aliens we're talking about. There needs to be assimilation. And yet we get balkanization. And the politics are such right now that it's only becoming increasingly more difficult to get rational decisions made by politicians in Washington, D.C. The Democrat Party is a fascist party, in my humble opinion. It's not interested in rational decisions. It's interested in power. Power, power, power. And it's through the party. The Republican Party has surrendered to the corporatists. It has surrendered to the U.S. Chamber of Crony Capitalism. And it will do anything to defeat the freedom wing of the Republican Party. And from now on, that's who we are and that's what we are. The freedom wing of the Republican Party. Open borders is not the modern history of the United States. Illegal immigration is not the modern history of the United States. Unless you ignore Truman and Eisenhower and Cesar Chavez and Ralph Abernathy and the union movement. Unless you ignore them. And I want you to know when our immigration laws were fundamentally altered in 1965. 1965, part of the 1960s radical movement. It was Republicans who objected and said this day would come, and this day has come. It was Republicans who objected. Now, we can't win elections like this. We're not going to win elections like this. But there's even something more important than party politics. What kind of country do we want? Where anybody from anywhere can come in, whatever their intentions, whomever they are, whether they're going to contribute to society or take from society? Is this what your ancestors have built and your ancestors' ancestors have built? We're not against immigration. We're against chaos, anarchy, catastrophe. We're against a massive welfare state. And that's what it's attracting people to this country, the massive welfare state. Because we're not expanding freedom and opportunity in America, not under this president. We're shrinking it. This is the history that they won't tell you about and that you now know about. I'll be right back. The Veterans Administration, the Internal Revenue Service, the Environmental Protection Agency, the Interior Department, the Department of Justice, HHS and Obamacare. Look at these disasters under the radical left as they continue to expand government and impose their will on the American people. Look what they've done. Look at the VA. Look at the IRS. Look at the EPA and the Interior Department. Look at the Department of Justice, HHS, and Obamacare. Complete, unmitigated disasters. And these are the monuments to liberalism. And so we have this situation. A massive central government. A president who considers himself a mastermind, a social engineer. A president, a Democrat Party, an administration that thinks it needs to do a whole lot more before Obama leaves office in 2.5 years. And if the courts block him, he'll use his pen. And if Congress doesn't help him, he'll use his pen. These are remarkable times, remarkably bad times. And the media, well, listen to them. You see them. You hear them. You hear them on my program. You see them on TV. Do they seem concerned about any of this? Not in the least. Not in the least. The story's always the same. The poor illegal alien who's come to the United States. Don't we have an obligation to them? And I think to myself, did we drag them over the border? Did we do something to bring these folks here? No. We don't have an obligation to any of them. Now, we can treat people humanely and send them home. We used to do that, believe it or not. That's why I'm giving you the history, the real history. Can't bring it up anymore. No deportation. Don't use that phrase, self-deportation. Oh, no. And you're not just attacked by the left, you're attacked by the Republican hack rhinos. By the Republican hack rhinos who work for the U.S. Chamber of Crony Capitalism. The pigs over there. And that's exactly what they are. And I said it, and I mean it. And Big Labor has genuflect. Big Labor has reversed course, selling out its members, selling out all workers in this country. They see an opportunity for new dues-paying members. Give a damn about their current membership. They want more, millions more. Why? So they can wield power. Why? So they can elect more Democrats. Why? I would ask you, men and women who carry a union card, has Barack Obama improved your lives? I would ask the coal miner and the steel worker. I would ask the assembly line worker. I would ask the teamster, the longshoreman. I would ask you, has Obama improved your lives? If so, how? If so, how? Do you know why Ralph Abernathy, an icon in the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King's right-hand man, through thick and thin, do you know why he opposed illegal immigration? I'll tell you why he opposed illegal immigration. Because he was concerned that foreigners coming into this country illegally would drive down wages and job opportunities for African Americans. That's why. Just as Cesar Chavez was concerned that they drive down opportunities and wages for Latinos who were in this country legally. Now you're not even allowed to talk about these things. Something wrong with us. What, you don't favor chaos on the border? The importation of unskilled or no skilled labor? Diseases and all the rest? I'll be right back.